Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 27th of March, 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, with me in studio, Mike Robinson. And we're delighted to be joined today by David Ellis. And we'll be on the very, very important subject of what's happening to Britain's military in Brexit without, of course, the exit.
We're starting with Russia and Skripal. Theresa May was in the Commons yesterday evening, and she had this to say. It's the same old stuff, but we'll listen to it for amusement value at the very least.
Mr. Speaker, let me start by updating the House on the situation in Salisbury. Sergei and Yulia Skripal remain critically ill in hospital. Sadly, late last week, doctors indicated that their condition is unlikely to change in the near future, and they may never recover fully. This shows the utterly barbaric nature of this act and the dangers that hundreds of innocent citizens in Salisbury could have faced. An investigation continues into all the locations where the Skripals had been present on Sunday the 4th of March. As a result, we now have a fuller picture of the recklessness of this act against our country. While Public Health England have made clear that the risk to public health is low, and this remains the case, we assess that more than 130 people in Salisbury could have been potentially exposed to this nerve agent. More than 50 people were assessed in hospital, with Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey taken seriously ill. I know everyone in the House will welcome the news that he has been discharged and continue, as we said earlier, to hold him and his family in our thoughts as he makes his recovery. Mr. Speaker, we are quite clear that Russia was responsible for this act.
So, look, I apologise for putting everybody through that, but she continues to lie, Brian, in the most obvious way. It was a nerve agent, a military-grade nerve agent, but there's no risk to people in Salisbury. But the key lie there is that X number of people, can't remember the exact number she said there, have been to hospital for assessment. 50. When in fact we've had the people from the local NHS trust writing letters to the Times saying that none of these people exhibited any symptoms whatsoever, but she implies that they did. Yeah. This is absolutely disingenuous of her. Now, she went on to in a separate speech, separate briefing that she gave to the Commons yesterday on her European Council meeting last week. She said this, and today 18 countries have announced their intention to expel more than 100 Russian intelligence officers from their countries. Well, are these intelligence officers or are these just Russian diplomats? We don't know.
Well, we don't know, Mike, but one thing we can say is that all nations use their diplomatic services to spy to some extent because they're there to pick up subtleties in politics within the country. They're there to find out what the dirt is. So at some level or other, it doesn't matter who it is, people who are working Foreign and Commonwealth Office and they're overseas are going to be spying. So to point the finger at Russia in this way is complete hypocrisy.
Well, she's crowing about the number of diplomats being expelled from other countries. So let's just look at the list. So 60 from the United States, the 23 already announced a week or two ago from the UK, 13 from the Ukraine, France 4, Germany 4, Poland 4, Canada 4, Czech Republic 3, Lithuania 3, Denmark 2, Italy 2, Netherlands 2, Estonia 1, Finland 1, Latvia 1. So it's hardly the other countries have pandered to her desire slightly to have some action taken, but they haven't exactly gone to the degrees that the United States or the UK have.
No, so, France and Germany, they're very significant, and then we could say countries close to the Russian border hedging their bets with one each there for Estonia, Finland, and Latvia.
New Zealand said they couldn't find anybody that was a spy, so they weren't going to throw anybody out. So maybe New Zealand isn't important enough for Russia to send spies to. I don't know. But anyway, what's the Russian reaction to this? Well, Maria Zakharova really pretty cross about it yesterday and today. So today she said, while all Russians were mourning the victims of the Kemerovo tragedy, this is the shopping centre where 40 or so children died as a result of fire and 20 adults, I think. Western politicians announced new hostile actions against Russia. We witnessed absolutely unjustified aggression. This is hard to believe in, and it will be hard to forget. Yesterday, she was quite definitive as well that there would be some announcement made on Thursday about this. So the Russians absolutely not happy. The Estonian president, well, Estonia is getting a bit, seem to be getting a bit wobbly about this, Brian. Maybe their proximity to the potential of a war front is getting to them. But, you know, the Estonian president saying during the Cold War, everybody knew the rules. What are the rules now? And this is a very good question. It seems that Theresa May mentioned the rules-based international order within the first 20 seconds of her speech in Parliament yesterday. She's making the rules up as she goes along.
Well, it's quite clear that this is the case and unbelievably dangerous. Perhaps we should just invite David Ellis to respond on that first section.
Oh, guys, thank you so much. Great to be on the show. Yeah, this is dead easy. Okay, this is very simple. This is a great big pretext wag the dog affair where you've got Mrs. May's government going to be judge, jury, and executioner for the Russian state, despite whatever isn't or isn't going on with whatever investigation. So forget that. But what we've got here is a wagging the dog exercise in order to rev up lots of defence spending in EU military union. And that's what all this is pretexting towards. So we've got the score sheet there from all the European nations expelling Russian diplomats, reading like a Eurovision Song Contest crib sheet. Yeah. So it is like a Eurovision Song Contest score, isn't it? You know. So it's a complete load of tosh, all this. Everybody's just got to look beyond it, look through it to actually the reality here. What's the big issue? You know, Mrs. May is desperate to get Europe herded up into military union, and so they can all, you know, then announce increases in defence spending. We've got Mike Fallon back on his feet in Parliament recently over the last couple of days talking about increasing defence spending from him. I mean, give over. Yeah. You know, this is the guy that dismantled Her Majesty's Armed Services while he was in office, and he's now talking about increasing defence spending. Yeah. Whilst we've got this, you know, this scene being set for EU military union. Oh, give over. I mean, this is just a nonsense. They're not fooling the Russians. Oh, you know, professional services that deal with this sort of thing, the same as we have. The only people they're fooling really are the British electorate. It's as simple as that. Well,
and I'm going to say, I don't think they're fooling all of the British electorate, David. In our chat box today, right. It's quite obvious that people are saying we can see through this thing. If I just jump back to that opening video to hear Theresa May saying, well, of course, there isn't any risk to the public in Salisbury. How do you know that, Theresa? Because you haven't actually done any proper investigation or any decontamination of the area. We had the army in, we had the police there in their decontamination suits, which we then learned weren't actually capable of dealing with a Novichok type militarized nerve agent. We had the lady from the Department of Health England saying, go away and wash your clothes. This was fantasy land. This was something out of, well, I don't know, Enid Blyton. Or probably that's a bit unkind, but this is so unbelievably transparent and childish. And now Theresa May is saying, oh, well, of course, there wasn't any risk to the public. Everybody's quite safe. But the thing does not stack up. The lies coming out of the British government at the moment over this affair are just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I've had one of Mrs. T's favourite chaps from Hereford on the phone, apoplectic about this. You've rightly picked up on it, Brian. This guy's an expert in nuclear, chemical, biological warfare, you know, because of what he's done. A warrant officer, he knows what he's talking about. He's done the job. And he's saying to me that what he's witnessing as a trained guy, they've just tore the whole thing up and they've made it into some sort of farce. He said what we're watching there in Salisbury is nonsense. And anybody that's done NBC stuff will tell you the same. It's just utter nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I think we hinted over the last couple of weeks that the people at Portendown aren't necessarily terribly impressed by the way that their work has been politicised over the last few weeks. And perhaps in an effort to sort of level the playing field, the British government has pushed out a good news story about Portendown today, Brian, because the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory has revolutionised the production of titanium. by reducing the 40-stage process to produce titanium down to just 2 steps, potentially halving the cost. Titanium, as we know, very, very strong metal, half the weight of steel, but 10 times the cost at the moment. It's very difficult and expensive to make. Gavin Williamson was really impressed with this. He said, our armed forces use titanium in everything from cutting-edge nuclear submarines to fighter jets through to life-changing replacement limbs. But production time and costs means we haven't always used it. This groundbreaking method is not only faster and cheaper, but could see a huge expansion of titanium parts and equipment throughout the military. So well done to DSTL for carrying out this work. Not so well done to the rather cynical British government, who, having dumped a load of manure on the heads of people at DSTL, are now attempting to make up for it by pushing out a good news story.
Yeah.
Cynical,
transparent, it's rubbish. Well, this is more rubbish. We better bring in the star. It's from a couple of days ago, but I think we've got to cover it. Russia nuclear strike on Britain would kill 8 million and cripple the UK. And this story is supposedly based on data from wargaming in the Cold War that's been released. And the paper is apparently surprised. It thinks that this is something absolutely extraordinary and the public needs to know. Well, in the whole of the Cold War period, of course, the military war games covered everything. They covered traditional warfare on land, at sea and in the air. They covered nuclear warfare. And of course, what were we wargaming? We were also wargaming how many people we could kill in Russia. So there's absolutely no substance to this article, because they attempted to twist it to make it appear that the Russians were the only ones doing this. Well, of course they weren't. But maybe something we should be aware of is that if Theresa May wants to take Britain into nuclear war with Russia, a so-called 2018 Barbarossa, we need to remember that we are actually a very tiny island, and it's pretty difficult to defend that against a massive nuclear strike, in contrast to somewhere like Russia. So this is a disgraceful article. It's alarmist propaganda from the Daily Star. It's clearly been engineered to help the government's political agenda. We've got these emotive graphics in it, Mike, that we're all to be worried that we're going to be blown to bits. And then they're saying those naughty Russians, they've actually upgraded their military, Mike, and they've got tanks, and they're 18 slides. So this is pumped out. None of these papers are questioning why the British government has absolutely slaughtered the British military. And I was told a few days ago that things are now so bad in the Royal Navy that they can only make significant repairs with the help of private contractors. So the Navy's artificer skill base has gone. The ability to actually be repairing machining themselves has gone. This has been replaced by the so-called liberal agenda, which is much more concerned on human rights in the armed forces. So astonishing stuff, Mike.
Absolutely. So the media therefore deserves to be on trial, and it is in Leeds on the 27th of May. Details at mediaontrial.uk. Please get along to that if you can. Tickets are £10, so do get along to that. Now, yesterday, Mark Anderson was talking about the issue of mayors, and well, the government has pushed out some information about mayors now, because Sheffield is to elect its own mayor in May. So the government has launched a campaign to raise public awareness of the Sheffield City region mayoral election, which starts today on the 26th starts today on the 26th of March. The campaign will give residents in Barnsley, Doncaster, Rotherham and Sheffield information on the election and how to vote in it. It's fantastic. The campaign will run across social media, in radio advertisements and in posters at numerous locations across the Sheffield City region. Similar awareness campaigns have already run across the UK ahead of mayoral elections in Greater Manchester, Liverpool, West Midlands, West of England, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, Tees Valley regions last year. Now, we've got to remind everybody, of course, that the regionalisation and devolution process is an EU policy, but let's not worry about that. This is all about bringing democracy to the lowest level, isn't it? Well, let's just remember briefly what Mark said about this yesterday.
Yeah, Neil Ferguson, the Oxford-educated historian, he spoke to the Chicago Council on Global Affairs just this past Friday, and he spoke about the social media networks and how they would appear. At first, they appeared that they would decentralize communication on the internet. They would make everybody, they give everybody a voice. The internet would be totally egalitarian. Cyberspace would be democratic. Even he was critical of how Facebook has become an unchallengeable monopoly that market forces alone cannot take down. The same thing with Google and Facebook, and YouTube and all that. And he was saying that these entities would look decentralized and gave us the impression the internet would be almost immune to monopoly, but in fact it ended up being more centralized and more prone to monopoly than ever. And he didn't make this analogy, but I'm drawing from this. The global cities movement as well would make us believe that the world is going toward a more decentralized model, when in fact, just like the social media lesson that we've learned, what looks like a decentralized global cities program, what looks like a devolving of power, returning power to the people, in fact, is the exact opposite.
Yeah, so Mark hit the nail on the head there, Brian. This is a point that we've been trying to make for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, I know what's coming up next, and this is the key to it, I think, isn't
Yes,
it?
absolutely. So just remind everybody of the Global Parliament of Mayors and the Abolition of the Electorate. This is a fantastic article on the UK Column website by Martin Edwards. You want to understand a bit more of what's going on here, please read this and spread it around.
Yeah, it's in the simplest terms, if we'd say to people, what is it? In the simplest terms, you're creating fiefdoms, the city-states, where you have the mayor and a few of his colleagues, cronies. They're going to be running the show. And of course, if they're running a show to a hidden hand pushing in the political agenda, then that's democracy gone.
Absolutely. Now, the origins of the initial scandal over Cambridge Analytica centered around Facebook and data being pulled off Facebook. This is one of the angles that's being followed by Westminster at the moment. And Mark Zuckerberg was invited to sit in front of MPs to answer questions about data and so on. He's decided not to bother attending, according to the Mirror here. And he was, as I say, called before the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee. He has decided not to do that, and he's going to send his Chief Technology Officer or Chief Product Officer along instead. So that's a shame. We won't see Zuckerberg in front of the MPs. So let's move on then to this. This is a new report out from RUSI today, rolling up Russia's red money carpet in the UK. So it's all about Russia, or is it? What they're saying is 2 decades of laying out the welcome mat to Russian cash is haunting the British government in the wake of the assassination attempt in Salisbury. It should not have taken the attempted murder of Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Salisbury to have finally brought to the fore the need to scrutinise the nature of the Russian money that has poured into the UK over the past 20 years, since the attack in early March, in which Police Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey was also poisoned, allegedly using a nerve agent, Novichok. The UK government has been searching for a suitable response to the alleged warlike act. One response that has been championed by many is financial, targeting the assets of those associated with Russian President Vladimir Putin and so on. And they talk about the use of unexplained wealth orders. They talk about the Criminal Finances Act. But the crux comes towards the end of the article, where they say the British government can no longer avoid the ugly truth that the reputation of London and the UK more broadly as the money laundering capital of the world is justifiably earned and has been stoked by the ambitions of the city, aided in no small part by past governments to dominate global finance, a failure to act now by investing in law enforcement capabilities, properly empowering supervisors and scrutinising investor visas, a failure to take away the welcome mat that greets money whatever its origin, would be a tacit endorsement of 20 years of neglect. RUSI misses the point here completely, Brian. This is significantly more than 20 years. Well, they call it neglect. This has been, the City of London has been the heart of financial corruption on the planet since it was pretty much established as a new financial centre in 1694 when the Bank of England was created.
This is true. Again, if we try and put this in simple terms, our police whistleblower John Wedger, speaking the other day, was talking about criminal activities around children. And one of the things he stressed was, of course, that criminal activity goes with whatever gang culture is in power. In the early days, it might have been the mafia and it could have been the Italians. Then you had other gangs come in. Then you had East European gangs, West Indian gangs at one point. And then we got through to the Russians moving in. Now, of course, the big twist is that, oh, these are bad people because they came out of Russia under Putin. But of course, Putin was kicking these people out of Russia, and they sought refuge in London.
The only place they could go, really, that was corrupt enough to...
They knew that if they came to London, of course, they were going to be helped and supported by the Labour Party. So we had involvement with Peter Mandelson, had companies running with some of these Russian organisations. Were they clean or not? We don't know. We had Mr. Zabludovitz giving money to BICOM and to the Tory party. Family goes back to military arms production and some connections with Israel. So that's all. Are the Tories going to give this money back? Are the Tories going to give the 3 million that came from Russian sources while Theresa May has been in power? Are they going to give that money back? Oh, no.
No.
We don't want to give the money back. We accept all of these people are involved in dodgy things and they're Russians, so they've got to be criminals, but we aren't going to give the money back. I mean, the hypocrisy is just breathtaking from this regime under Theresa May.
And there's a certain amount of hypocrisy in the Russi article as well, because while they're busy focusing on Russian money, they're ignoring the drugs money that's being laundered through the City of London and many other sources of dirty money that are heading through the City of London. But coincidentally, about the same time that the Russi report was coming out, the Global Financial Centres Index was coming out as well. And London remains on top of the world for global financial services, according to this report. So they are at the top, 794 points. They got the United States, or New York rather, got 793 points. And all the various countries are listed there, Hong Kong, Singapore, Tokyo, Shanghai, and it ends up with Frankfurt at the end with only 7 points. But nonetheless, City of London still right at the top. They came out in the top of the rankings for the most competitive business environment, and their reputation scored higher than any rival. Well, amongst the financial institutions, of course, that's exactly the type of reputation that London wants to encourage. So there we go. London is the best.
Well, encourage viewers and listeners to dig in themselves to where Tory money is coming from and who has actually funded the Conservative Party, who's controlling that money, because of course the person controlling the purse is in control of the Tory Party. And at this point, let's bring in this as a headline. We're going to focus on a journalist from The Guardian, Carol Cadwalader. And basically, she's now started to be asking some really good questions about big money, military-industrial complex, and politics. It looks like she's started to wake up. I'll just take you through a bit of this, and then we'll bring David Ellis in. Now, this is going back to the 7th of May 2017, and I think this is really important because there's some wonderful hindsight stuff here. So the headline is "The Great British Brexit Robbery, How Our Democracy Was Hijacked, a shadowy global operation involving big data, billionaire friends of Trump, and the disparate forces of the Leave campaign influenced the result of the EU referendum. As Britain heads for the polls again, is our electoral process still fit for purpose?" Now, the interesting thing is in that headline, we get a clue that this lady sees this as an attack on our position in the EU. And I'm going to say to both yourself, Mike, and to David, correct me in a minute, but I sense that she thinks that there's been some very dirty dealings done around Leave, which has affected our position and our relationship with the EU. So bear that in mind. Let's have a look at some of the detail as what this lady had to say. She says there are three strands to this story: how the foundations of an authoritarian surveillance state are being laid in the US, how British democracy was subverted through a covert, far-reaching plan of coordination enabled by a US billionaire, and how we're in the midst of a massive land grab for power by billionaires via our data which is being silently amassed, harvested and stored. Whoever owns this data owns the future. So it starts off, we've got an authoritarian surveillance state growing in America. She doesn't seem to see what's happening in Britain at the moment, Mike, but then it's about data and whoever controls the data. Well, she goes on. It also reveals the elephant in the room as we hurtle into a general election. Britain tying its future to America, to an America that's being remade in a radical, alarming way by Trump. So we're linking it back into America, and it's Trump, that nasty man Trump, that's the cause of all the problem. But it goes on. I know there's a bit of detail here, bear with me. It was with aggregate IQ that Vote Leave, the official Leave campaign, chose to spend 3.9 million, more than half its official 7 million campaign budget, as did three other affiliated Leave campaigns, Believe, Veterans for Britain and the Democratic Unionist Party, and they spent a further £757,750. Coordination between campaigns is prohibited under UK electoral law unless the expenditure is jointly declared. It wasn't. Vote Leave says the Electoral Commission looked into this and cleared them. And she says, key to understanding how data would transform the company is knowing where it came from. She's talking about Cambridge Analytica here. And it's a letter from the Director of Defence Operations SCL Group that helped me realise this. It's from Commander Steve Tatham, PhD, MPhil, Royal Navy retired, complaining about my use in my Mercer article of the word disinformation. This is fantastic. Just have a look at this. It says, KI wrote back to him pointing out references in papers he's written to deception and propaganda, which I beg your pardon, that should be I wrote back to him pointing out references in papers he'd written to deception and propaganda, which I said I understood to be roughly synonymous with disinformation. It's only later that it strikes me how strange it is that I'm corresponding with a retired Navy commander about military strategies that may have been used in the British and US elections. And I'll just give you this last one. What's been lost in the US coverage of this data analytics firm is the understanding of where the firm came from, deep within the military-industrial complex. So she recognises the military-industrial complex, a weird British corner of it populated as the military establishment in Britain is by old-school Tories. Geoffrey Patty, a former Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Defence Procurement and Director of Marconi Defence Systems, used to be on the board, and Lord Marland, David Cameron's pro-Brexit former trade envoy, a shareholder. So who wants to come in here? I'm saying I'm picking up what this lady is talking about. She's woken up to a military-industrial complex. She's woken up to billionaires helping to fund it. She's woken up to military propaganda specialists helping to mix it in the civilian world. But she thinks this is all an attack on our relationship with the EU.
Yes.
Is that the case?
David?
David.
Yeah, she's almost there, isn't she? But she's missing the whole core of the point. And the core of this, the core factor here that overlaps all of the other things that I've mentioned, all of the other things like Vote Leave or whatever, is military. So she's escaped, and it's not as if I haven't tried to say to her, look, what you're dealing with here at the bottom of all this, or at the top of this, the end-to-end, is EU military union. And that's at the core of this. The overlapping factor is military amongst all of the facets of this. And the one big thing that's just about to be launched, born, given birth to, or whatever, or as Junkers calls it, the sleeping beauty of Lisbon, is EU military union. Now, if she would attempt to look at that, she would then understand what's going on with this whole field.
And can I,
And that's the.
Dave?
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, she's on Twitter, so please interact with her and try and get this message over to her. What this is all about is that it's about EU military union. Now, I can tell you for a fact, all of the facade individuals that you've mentioned there, the politicians, have, when I've face to face them, refused or run off or got, very irate or just frankly refused to engage on the mere reference of saying to them, well, we've got this thing called EU military union. We want to talk to you about it. We want to evaluate. Whoa. Oh, no. Farage is the best example. He basically run off instantaneously. Now, this is a man that's supposed to be anti-EU. So the concept for him shouldn't be a shock, shouldn't be something he'd want to run off about, because he's apparently vehemently opposed to Britain being in the European Union. Now, one would think that would include being opposed to currency union, customs union. So what's the problem then with talking about military union? And it's not as if I haven't had this before with other Conservative members of Parliament and ministers,
Right,
face to face. So, speaking from experience, Mrs. Cadwallader wants to look at EU military union, and then she'd understand what the big issue is at the moment.
David, totally agree with that. We're going to show some more detail on this business of EU military union. Well, one of the points that I think I'm trying to understand what is going on in this lady's head, and what I pick up is that she feels that this attack via Cambridge Analytica and the manipulation of data and use of applied psychology, it's simply been used to interfere with our relationship with the EU. What she doesn't understand is that the big money, the military industrial complex and the rest of it, the deep state, is actually manipulating the whole of the EU agenda. And can I come back to you, Mike, because originally in the beginning you said that the whole of the idea of a Brexit had been engineered to take us to the next stage, which was a movement towards world trade, correct me if I've got this wrong, movement towards world trade, where we could see that the US-UK power bloc was going to be dramatically reinforced.
Absolutely. And look, I'm arguing and have been arguing for quite some time that Brexit is being used as a smokescreen to put together institutions which haven't previously been seen in the form that they are emerging in. So one of the things that had already more or less failed when David Cameron decided to call the referendum was the trade policy. And in the Best of Both Worlds document, which Cameron published, which we have to remember was a legally binding agreement between Britain and a reformed European Union at that time. So if we had voted to remain, then that Best of Both Worlds document would have formed Britain's future relationship with the European Union. And at the heart of that Best of Both Worlds document was TTIP. Now, TTIP, by the time the referendum had been called, was already on its last legs, and it has now failed as a policy. But they are not going to, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but they are not going to abandon a policy which they have spent decades building up to. Right. So under the smokescreen of Brexit, they are building a new trading infrastructure and dispute resolution, because this is one of the key negotiating positions for Brexit is, will Britain fall under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in its trading relationships with the EU and other countries? And Theresa May says, well, under Brexit, we will not fall under the European Court of Justice. European Union has previously been saying, or the European Commission has previously been saying, yes, you will fall under the jurisdiction of European Court of Justice. But in recent weeks, they suggest they're talking about some other completely separate dispute resolution mechanism. So all these institutions are being built under the smokescreen and the chaos being created by Brexit, and EU military unification at the heart of that as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this lady journalist, it's great to see she started to wake up. She's putting some very big bits together, but she can't understand that it's the deep state controlling the politicians. I think she still believes that politicians in Westminster are people driving the policy. No, they're not. So let's move on to where you want to go, David, which is let's bring in veterans for Britain. Now, we were a little bit, we were poking a little bit of a small stick at them a while ago because we said they simply would not speak out enough. We brought this man into the frame, Lee Rotherham. Now, he was one of their key researchers. He came out with this statement that a nation state that contracts out its defence has ceased to be. We said that is amazingly accurate. That's exactly what the government is doing with the British Armed Forces at the moment. And we pointed out a wall of silence on EU military unification, and you've reinforced that, David, and you've added to it that even Nigel Farage ran away when you started to put information in front of him about what was happening with this unified EU military structure. So very strange stuff. Now we get to this. We've got Veterans for Britain actually getting stuck in. Ex-officers warn of defence giveaway in Brexit agreement, and the articles that they featured are around this man and what he has been saying. Let's have a look. Basically, he says the exit agreement shows that the Cabinet Office does not intend to regain the defence autonomy it gave away on paper in 2017. As a result of a below-radar deal reached 15 months ago, the UK will now be transitioning via a third country arrangement that provides a U-bend route for the UK to come back fully under EU authority in the future. And he adds to that, political commentators in academia and the media are largely yet to grasp the small print of what is really going on. By that time, it will, of course, be too late. And I'll bring in the last one, which you can see on the Veterans for Britain site. He also added, it's not wise to stand still in setting concrete, and that's what this transition agreement amounts to in terms of defence. So this couldn't be clearer, David, that we've now got an attack on Veterans for Britain via this whole Cambridge Analytica debacle. Yes, they were all involved with Cambridge Analytica, but now the finger's being pointed at them that you're bad boys because you're helping to break up the EU effectively. But we finally got Veterans for Britain coming out with some real hard truths and facts. What can you tell us?
That is correct. Yeah, we've got these officers who I've had quite a bit of interaction with. They're now obviously in there within David Banks's Veterans for Britain, and they're doing what needs to be done. In private, I think their language is a lot stronger, and that's really what we need to be seeing from the likes of Julian Thompson, Royal Marine, and Roger Lane Knott. We need a gloves-off situation now. Jonathan Riley is completely correct with what he's saying there. I would go further. So I'm fully supporting what they're saying and what they're doing, but I would go a little further. And the reason for this is we need the majority of people in Britain to understand what this thing is. We are a member currently as the deal, the draft deal, and the precursor to it, which was being a member of PESCO. Being a member of that means that we are, as a nation, a member of EU military union. That is the reality, and that's the target, the frame that the general public need to look at. We are in military union as it stands.
Yeah.
And the reason that the government and the ministers and these high-level Tories will not talk about this, and they will not call it what it actually is. We've got David Davis now saying that this is a deep and special relationship or deep and special partnership or any of these other PR washwords, because he knows damn well what this is. This is Britain EU military union. And the reason he isn't saying that is because the British people will not, under any circumstances, subscribe to this at the ballot box. So because they can't sell it at the ballot box, they think that they can use a rehashed PR reframe of the Macmillan special nuclear contract that we had with America over the atomic bomb and so on, that this will suffice to actually use as a term of reference for EU military union or an alternative term of reference. So we've now got David Davis saying Sunday on BBC, Andrew Marr, that this is now this is now a given, that the defence partnership is secure within the draft Brexit deal. And Jonathan Riley there rightly pointing out that we've got real problems now as a nation, serious problems, because if you think you want to see what the EU has done to our agriculture, our coal, our steel, our fishing industry, our car industry, and every other thing, it's annihilated it. There is no payoff. There's no payoff for the British nation for this. It's just annihilation. It won't be cheaper. It won't be innovative. It will be absolute devastation. You will have conglomerates of foreign troops coming onto our soil and telling us what we can and can't do in this arrangement. And then the EU are going to give us a dirty, great big tax bill.
Yeah. David, let's just add a little bit of this. This is the jigsaw, I'll call it, from Veterans for Britain website, where they've put some of the key bits that form this deep and special partnership. So they've got financial contributions. And of course, we know that what's coming is a full EU treasury, European Defence Fund, European Defence Industrial Development Programme, EU defence procurement directives, European Investment Bank continued membership, EU Commission and Council decision making, continued application of EU rules, European Defence Agency and EU battle groups controlled by EU Council. So Veterans for Britain, well done Veterans for Britain, they're now really telling it like it is. And since you mentioned it in your destruction, we've now got this. This is a smokescreen. We've suddenly switched from what we need to, which is talking about defence. What are we trying to cover it up with by getting on to fishing? It's just outrageous. The EU has raped Britain's fishing grounds over a great many years. Look at a couple of the comments here in this article. DEFRA's data reveals Spanish firms have bought permanent control of 88% of the fish quota for whales. This has been going on for years and years, British fishermen being absolutely destroyed and their families and the communities for this huge EU fishing operation. One Dutch ship, it says, Cornelius Frolic, operating from Hull, owns a fifth of England's entire quota. I'm not sure I believe that statistic. I think that will be an entire quota of a particular type of fish, but nevertheless, we're seeing it. This has suddenly come up. And of course, we've got Nigel Farage absolutely on board with problems in the fishing industry. Nigel Farage won't get to grips with the EU military unification. Final comment from you. Keep it short, please, David.
Well, he wouldn't talk about EU military union, despite any attempts to do so. But, you know, he's quite happy to throw this in the hat now. And it's really, folks, it's like a shutting the stable door when the horse is already well out, isn't it? I mean, you know, don't get me wrong. The fishing problem is a major problem. But the timing of this is so cynical, because really what our primary problem now is what we've all got to focus on in order to get the Brexit deal is we've got to focus on EU military union. If we don't stop that, then the whole thing of us being a nation ceases. And Brexit is just an absolute joke, and the entire electorate and the nation has been totally and utterly mugged off.
Yeah. Okay, David, thank you very much.
Okay, I think this will be the last one, but this is the Telegraph here. Patients not told about doctors' big pharma conflicts of interest. This is, they say, a new study. Well, this is a British Medical Journal, a survey showing that 6% of National Health Service trusts publish the register of gifts and hospitality online. And that the majority make it practically impossible for patients to determine if there's a conflict of interest. They say that since 2010, direct gifts and inducements have been banned by the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry, and that was following a Telegraph investigation. But clinicians may receive payments for a variety of reasons, such as delivering lectures or attending conferences and training events, which also often come with lavish hospitality. So they're saying that in 2017, the pharmaceutical industry reportedly spent £116 million on such activity. So that's an interesting report, and I suggest people have a read of it.
Very interesting. We'll add this one because what Theresa May is now doing, her concern for the NHS, which she's been working to privatise with the Tories over a great many years. Her concern is so great, they're going to save it by taxing us more. This is an absolute pack of lies. Have a read of this article. It's breathtaking that they think they can get away with it. And we'll just say this is more good reason for people to come and hear what the speakers have to say at the UK Column Dying for Good Health conference. Tickets available if you click that little box, which you can see on the front page of the UK Column. And over the weekend, Mike has been busy because we've now got some detail of the speakers starting to come up, and you can get online and have a look at that. But one of the key things is these speakers are very new speakers. For us, at least, they've been out trying to do good work for many years. They're very outspoken. They're taking huge risks to bring the information to the surface. And we're going to encourage people to come along and discover what is really taking place in the NHS and the wider healthcare system. Well, that's it for today. What an amazing situation. Nothing that we hear from the mainstream media on a day-to-day basis is talking about what is really happening in UK, what is really taking place in this bizarre situation of Brexit without the exit. But you are hearing that analysis on UK Column. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and please push the information around and use the evidence that we're bringing forward. It's not enough to listen. Get out there challenging those MPs, local councillors, whoever it's going to be, in a polite, reasonable way. Let's get the truth moving around. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.